You are the youngest person in history to have ever climbed Mount Everest, right?
That is correct. I was 13 years old when we reached the summit of Mount Everest, and then 15 years old when I completed the seven summits. To be 12, 13 years old and preparing for Mount Everest was
Mm.
not easy. We did encounter one avalanche, which is a story in of itself because it was just, yeah, an extremely terrifying moment. It was just so loud and so intense, and you could also just kind of feel it like rumbling and kind of vibrating through your body, and you've just never felt so like vulnerable that you're just at like you're literally feeling like you're just going to be crushed with the finger of God almost. It's like you're just feel that small and insignificant
Wow.
when it happens. And was my crampons, the spikes on the bottom of my boot essentially were like razor thin, brand new, or razor sharp and brand new, and had punctured both of his thighs. And
Oh my
I
gosh.
think during the actual slide too, one went into his forehead as well. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, there was one person who did get fully buried and ended up dying from that accident. Up there, you have to look out for one another because when you're
Sure.
up in the death zone, you're in an area in which life is so fragile already with your body and how much it's taken to even survive up there that like if any slight thing goes wrong, it is all hands on deck on making sure that person makes it out safely.
So we're rolling. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Ray. Good to be here.
Yeah, so you are the youngest person in history to have ever climbed Mount Everest, right?
That is correct. Yes, Mount Everest as well as the seven summits.
No. And how old were you when you climbed Everest?
I was 13 years old when we reached the summit of Mount Everest, just a month and a half shy of 14 years old, and then
Mhm.
15 years old when I completed the seven summits.
That is insane. So, oh, like, I hear to train for Mount Everest, it takes a long time. It's not an easy feat. So, what was that like as, being so young and preparing to do one of the most difficult feats?
Well, to be 12, 13 years old and preparing for Mount Everest was
Mm.
not easy. Also, given the fact that I had a lot of friends too who weren't really into mountain climbing, it was a very unusual thing to be into at that age.
Mm.
And throughout the whole time of climbing the seven summits from age 9 to 15, you go through a lot of changes through those years regardless. But from 12 years old to 13 years old, when we were training for Mount Everest, was a hell of a challenge. Not only I thought as training as the easiest part of it. I think that the planning and logistics of it, that was the biggest headache, and I felt like it was a lot more. Um, I felt like I was only focusing on one thing when I was training more so. Like, yes, it was physically hard, but mentally it was a way to kind of clear my head a little bit. But not to mention, I mean, it was still challenging, but the planning and logistics part,
Mm.
that was definitely difficult. And I think even still to this day, like I felt like I did a good job as far as helping and just kind of like understanding what's going on behind the scenes as well. But with my parents, of course, like having to be the only ones that could be able to actually like arrange everything. I give so much credit to them, and I still even to this day like feel like I don't fully understand just like what goes into an expedition like that. And so to be under and so yeah, to be honest, I mean it was a challenge to for sure like just keep track of all the gear too. Like I remember the couple of months leading up to the expedition, like our whole living room in our house, we just had gear everywhere,
Mm.
just so neatly organized as well, and just so prepared to pack everything. And we're getting ready. Like our baggage fee receipt was about to be absolutely insane too, leading up to the mountain because we were bringing almost a metric ton of gear alone with us, which was unbelievable because you're in Nepal and China for about 2 months. And also leading up to the climb, we did hypoxic tent altitude training. So basically, there are these tents that encapsulate you right bed in your bedroom, and you essentially have a machine that is able to pump air that kind of simulates a high altitude environment. So prior to the climb, we were basically acclimatizing that right around like 20,000 feet, which was beneficial because the base camp is at 18,000 feet, and then up to 21,000 feet was where we spent most of our time anyways. So beyond that, it would be, just regular acclimatizing and getting ready
What's
for
it
the high
like?
altitude.
What's it like being in that altitude?
It's tough. It's tough. Yeah, everything that you take for granted living at sea level, or I mean, I live at like 4,000 feet elevation. I'm trying to translate this into meters for your audience too, because I have a difficult time doing that as well. I used to be better, but it's difficult. Everything that you do on a daily basis just feels like an extra chore. Like maintaining a healthy appetite, drinking enough water. You have to drink more water, especially in an environment like that. You have to just make sure you're going to the bathroom regularly, maintaining your sleep quality. Just all these basic things you never really think about in everyday life, where you just had to pay extra attention to in that kind of environment. And your body is just, your body and your metabolism are just working extra hard to even survive up in those altitudes as well. And it's a drain. Like, it's literally like, even just to walk an extended period of time. And when you first get there, it's difficult. Like, everything you do is just like, you're just out of breath. Even like sometimes walking from your tent to a dining room tent, it's difficult.
Exhausting.
Yeah,
Sure. So there's
exactly.
the less oxygen, but it's also the cold. So how do you prepare for that?
The cold is something you don't really prepare as much for. And where I'm from too, it's not
Mhm.
it's in Southern California, and we're from a mountain town of higher elevation too, of like
Mhm.
2,500 meters elevation. So we do get snow in the winter, but it melts very quickly, and we don't like, we're very far south latitude wise. So um, it could have been a colder place to prepare for. But aside from that, honestly, it's like just making sure you know how to layer correctly. And as far as preventative measures to keep yourself from being cold, it just was always important to just constantly like move your hands and wiggle your toes all the time in your boots as well, to just keep your blood flowing and your skin moving too. So aside from that, though, it's really not a lot that you can do. You just have to keep moving, and also like, don't sweat too much. Yeah, you in fact, you try not to sweat, and it's
How
hard
can
to
you
sweat
try
to
not to
begin with.
sweat?
Yeah, because it's so dry up there, it's hard to sweat anyway. But
Mhm.
also, like, to sweat is not really a good thing, because that can cause hypothermia once you
Wow.
stop moving. And so it can be pretty bad. So there's a lot of things that you just have to pay attention to for preventative measures. But for preparing for the cold, um, there's really not much we could do.
Do you get trained in that stuff? Like when you book Everest, like I don't know what the booking process is on that, but is there like a training you go through? I know like you can get a Sherpa or you can hire someone. Do they talk you through that? Or because I'm sure there's a lot of like when you start a job, you have to do all the health and safety stuff. I'm sure like when you climb Everest, is there such a training you go through? Like don't sweat
Like
and
a health assessment.
yeah, not even health assess. Well, is there a health assessment and like that stuff? Like try not to sweat. Like, how do you learn that?
Mhm.
Is there like a training you do before you climb Everest?
It was all the accumulated experience from all the previous climbs that
Mhm.
led up to it. So Mount Everest was number 6 of the 7 summits that we had done. And so the um, the whole idea was like, everything experience wise and everything that we had learned from previous mountains, it's like, if we made any mistakes, we were very good at like debriefing and being able to discuss what went wrong, what could we improve on, what went well that we could continue replicating. And so that Everest, we knew there was just going to be like,
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, no mountain is like where you want to make any mistakes, but Everest we knew was just like, we have to have all our lessons learned in order to climb a mountain like this. And so um, prior to that, though, and then even just to touch on like the health assessment thing, like I was getting like VO2 max tests going on because just out of curiosity and like also for research too, just because nobody my age had gone into high altitude or even climbed in the Himalayas too much as well. So basically that was kind of interesting to kind of like see what my body was capable of. And then but leading up to it as well, like I was kind of surprised. I think nowadays you do have to take like more of a health assessment like all across the board. And I think in Nepal you do. If you were to climb on that side, on Tibet's side, I think it's a little bit less. Like they just kind of want your money over there. But nowadays, obviously, at that time there was no age limit, and currently there is an age limit at this point. So there's a lot of things that have changed as far as like the rules of climbing Everest. And I know that on the Nepal side, they'll often require like a resume of the mountains that you've climbed previously to issue you a permit.
Wow. So one thing I picked up from watching your videos is that your parents were really supportive of you climbing it, which I find incredible, because if I'm 25 years old, if I said to my parents, I'm going to climb Everest, they'd say, yeah, right. You're not allowed to go back to your room. So your parents were cool right from the get-go, and they climbed with you, right?
Yeah, they climbed every mountain with me. So my parents divorced when I was 3 years old, and it was my dad and his longtime girlfriend. I always referred to her as my stepmom, Karen, who and it was the three of us who had climbed all the 7 summits together. We were a tight bunch for sure. We trained together. We prepared together. We were just we lived together back at home, so we learned a lot about each other leading up to Everest too. And honestly, just from the get-go, they've always been an adventurous couple too. My dad had an expedition racing background along with Karen as well. So with expedition racing, like they've done adventure races all around the world that are multi-sport and mostly self-propelled with like a map and compass. So there used to be a show called the Eco Challenge back in the day. That was a Mark Burnett production. I don't know if I know my dad did a race actually in Scotland. I don't know what year it was, or I don't even know if that was a part of Eco Challenge at the time, but I know he did do a race over there. He said it was like one of the hardest races he had done, also because it was just pouring rain the entire time. But he also, but he said he had he'd been to places like there. He'd been to like the jungles of Malaysia and Borneo. He'd been to like Brazil and Morocco and British Columbia and the Swiss Alps. And so he had been all over and been really tested through all the elements too. So he kind of incorporated like this fast and light style of climbing into our training and how we approach mountains. So we were more essentialists and kind of minimalist kind of from the get-go. Sure. We also operated on a budget too. So we, for the most part, were kind of like, we were really stretching our resources with what we had to, and we didn't really have a lot of we didn't have a lot of financial backing. We had a good amount of gear too, just from like the adventure racing portion of what he did and all the gear that he accumulated, and then through sponsors in the meantime, like a lot, they were able to support us a lot with gear, but money of course was always kind of an issue as well. But so that was kind of what our style was. And for Everest and like the Himalayas, it's like you kind of have to abide by the traditional style. I think over there you have to definitely carry a little bit heavier gear, but for the most part, a lot of the mountains leading up to it, we were like mostly in trail running shoes instead of like full on, mountaineering boots or something like that. Like we were really not cutting corners, but really kind of trimming down all the weight that we could. And just again, we were essentialists really for the most part.
Yeah, sure. I mean, otherwise you need to carry all that stuff with you, and that probably makes it a lot harder if you're carrying more stuff.
Well, yeah, we would train with like heavy backpacks. We would train with the heavy, with a lot of like the heavy gear that we would have. But all in all, it would make carrying the lighter gear just a lot. It made us stronger, or made me stronger for the most part. It felt like my dad and Karen, I mean, they trained, but they were kind of more maintaining their strength throughout the whole journey. Whereas me, like I had to kind of go from not super active to being
Yeah.
very athletic towards the end of it too. So I had a lot of work to be done, whereas like they kind of just had, they only had to do like a little bit every day to kind of maintain their strength.
Sure. I mean, plus being 13 years old, there must have been a lot of excitement about climbing Everest. Did you know at that point you were the youngest person to attempt it?
I did, yeah, I did. When leading up to like when I was 10 years old, I think it was after Denali, um, between Denali and Karsten's Pyramid, that was when I kind of knew that Everest was creeping up, probably sooner than we would, because I was thinking about like our plan initially was to climb Everest at 16 when I was 16 years old. And then we had climbed 3 mountains in the year of 2007 alone. So that just put us so ahead of schedule. And then leading up to Everest, I knew I was going to be the youngest because I think the youngest person to climb up beforehand was 17 or 16. And then yeah, just right off the bat, then all of a sudden I was 13. I was like, well, we're doing this. And then the stars kind of aligned, and with the amount of support that we had and what we were aiming for was we were kind of opportunists as well. We were like, well, it's I'm 13, we only have 2 mountains left. Mount Vinson, Antarctica didn't work out that year because of some logistics issues, so it's like, guess we're going to go for Everest. And I'm 13. So at the same time, we were like, well, I guess this is the year to do it. It'll definitely be beneficial for sure in some ways. So like, we didn't intentionally, try to set the record, but like the few months, like when Vincent failed that winter, we were like, all right, I guess we're going for Everest next and putting all of our eggs in that basket. And then it just word caught pretty quick around the media, and then next thing you know, we had like news cameras and people showing up to our house and doing like news specials. So that was kind of the start of the media whirlwind.
Yeah, it must have been super exciting. I saw a TED talk you did just after it, and you were like 14 years old, and you're giving this TED talk about climbing Everest, and I
Yeah,
thought it was awesome.
I was young, man. I was young. It's always tough to watch those videos,
You
and
had a
I
very
just
different
gotta.
hairstyle back then.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I had a very different hairstyle even like 2 weeks ago. I
Oh
just
yeah.
recently cut this a little bit ago. Yeah, my hair was kind of actually getting back to the length of that
Oh
too. I
really?
used to have like longer curly hair, but yeah, that TED talk was interesting. That was kind of what started my speaking career quite a bit. That's kind of what set it off actually, because I knew that it was a story worth telling, and to be up on stage and to share the story with people, we realized that there was that it was going to have an impact on inspiring people who were around my age, who were looking for some sort of ambition or passion to kind of chase and look for. So we realized it had an impact, and then that's kind of why we wrote the book as well, so that it was a legacy to be in students' hands all around the country and the world.
Yeah. So what's your book called?
My book is called No Summit Out of Sight, and it was a collaborative effort with myself, my dad, Karen, and Linda LeBlanc is the co-author too. She's the one who had wrote everything down. The whole fact is, like, I didn't really keep a journal on a lot of these climbs, so we just had to recount the memory of all three of us, essentially, to just remember what happened on which date, which was hard too. That was difficult to be like, no, this happened on May 17th. No, that happened on May 20th, and so we also had to like review a lot of footage and kind of recompile the story. So no, yeah, if I were to give anyone some advice on, if they're doing some amazing stuff like that, like, keep a journal, not only because, if you want to write a book about it, it'll be easier, but right now, any day, I would do anything to just see my handwriting back then, and just to see what I was feeling at the time too, which I can only recollect so much of, 10, 11 years, 11 years later now. So yeah, it's crazy. It's
Sure,
been
man.
that long at this point.
I'll put a link to your book and all of your
Thank
social
you.
media in the description. So if people want to get hold of your book, they can do that. That's awesome. Another question I want to speak to you about is the dangers of climbing Mount Everest, because I watched a TED talk It was by, I want to say his name was Ken Kilmer. Do you know the story of the guy who went into a hypothermic coma on Everest and then he woke
Yeah,
up?
I do.
Yeah, so I was watching the TEDx video of that recently. Incredible, incredible story. So there's obviously a lot of different dangers. I think there's parts where you have to climb over really deep crevices. If you fall, it's a very deep fall. I think you're at risk of like potentially avalanche and other things. What are some of the dangers you actually face on the journey?
Yeah, there's a lot of uncontrollable elements
Mm-hmm.
climbing any mountains for that matter, especially going to Alaska, even to climb Denali, where there was just brutal cold to face and really not much you can do to kind of prepare leading up to it. But you just have to make sure you just have the right gear in order to
Mm-hmm.
prevent you from facing some hypothermic, you know, roadblocks and just general like health conditions too that you can develop, especially when you're at high altitude. It's very easy for that to happen. So there's the cold, which is pretty self-explanatory, and just trying to prevent that, preventing frostbite. The other is also high altitude sickness as well. Not to mention it's just a brutal environment, which we were talking about earlier, in which your body is just struggling all the time just to function for the most part. And also your brain and your red blood cells can essentially starve from oxygen if you move at too fast of a pace and cover too much ground too quickly elevation wise, and that can result in some serious illnesses and can cause a lot of brain swelling as well.
Wow.
So that's a condition called edema is what it's called, and basically it's something that you just really don't want to happen, because it will just require you to get down to a lower elevation quickly. Like most of the time, that will like also require an airlift out, which you don't want that to ever happen.
Sure.
And then you have crevasses, obviously, which we dealt with, but not to the degree that most people would deal with if they were to climb on the Khumbu Icefall side, which we did not. We climbed on the northeastern side in the country of China, in the Tibetan region. And that area, we did not encounter as many crevasses. However, we did encounter one avalanche, which is a story in of itself, because it was just, an extremely terrifying moment that is tough to recollect, because I remember it vividly, but it all happened so quick, but so slow in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a moment that I just knew that I remember asking myself, like, is this the day? I really was just
Wow.
like genuinely worried for my life and actually concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just
So, how far into the Everest climb were you when the avalanche occurred?
it was it was about 2.5 weeks into the climb from what I remember, because we got to the mountain around late April. So I want to say it was around like April 17th, between April 17th and April 20th of that year. And it was pretty early on in the climb, and we were climbing in between in between advanced base camp and camp 1. And camp 1 is kind of sitting on top of a saddle, in which to get from base camp, or from advanced base camp to camp 1, you have to climb through the only section of crevasses, which is definitely a moment in which you're on heightened alert, because that's more of a place where it's a lot of unpredictable and uncontrollable things that can just happen at any time, as far as like if you're next to a big ice wall, like that could come collapsing down at any moment. When you're up past that point, there's a lot more controllable risk factors, such as wind, such as the cold. That's more stuff that we would have to deal with, and just more exposure to those elements. Whereas in this zone in particular, you have it's more of a glacier that you're crossing through here. So you just have a lot more like shifting parts of it, in which that just all happens no matter what. And you just have zero way of being able to control it. So I remember we were traversing across a certain path, basically almost kind of like a gully in a way, kind of a shallow, long gully. And right above it is this big wall known as a serac, which is essentially kind of like a big ice shelf. And basically what happened was extremely similar to what you see like Greenland and some glaciers in Alaska, like when they get pushed out to the furthest edge onto the ocean, and when they all of a sudden start to collapse, the avalanche replicated exactly that, in which it just all came down crumbling and just turned into like smaller ice pieces and snow basically, and just created this huge snow dust cloud. And at that point we were just so caught off guard, and it was just so loud and so intense. And you could also just kind of feel it like rumbling and kind of vibrating through your body, and you just never felt so like vulnerable, that you're just at like, you're literally feeling like you're just going to be crushed with the finger of God almost, you know. It's like you're just feel that small and insignificant when it happens. And so it's just a really humbling moment for sure. And so we were lucky because we were just like, I was buried up to my waist, almost kind of like my upper torso almost. My dad was right behind me, and we had my stepmom and one of our lead Sherpas as well, who was up above, and were luckily not impacted by the actual slide itself. Luckily, we weren't carried too far. Otherwise, we would have went off of a pretty steep cliff too. So I get up, and as I'm applying pressure with my foot to even just like get out of the snow, I just hear kind of my dad just make a noise like, "Oh my God." And I was like, oh my God, I hope he's okay. Like, I don't know what did I do? I thought he was hurt from the avalanche. Turns out what happened was my crampons, the spikes on the bottom of my boot essentially were like razor thin, brand new, or razor sharp and brand new, and had punctured both of his thighs. And I think during the actual slide too, one went into his forehead as well. So to say I was apologetic is an understatement after that. And considering
it must have been really quite a drastic thing to happen. The fact that your dad actually ended up underneath you and you didn't know he was underneath you. It must have been.
Well, I knew he was behind me, but he was like, he wasn't buried underneath. He was just kind of behind me, like very, very close. So I think just the way that we kind of got pushed into each other from the snow, that's how it happened essentially. Wow. It's still kind of tough to recount exactly what happened, but yeah, Karen got a pretty intense clip of exactly what happened. And it was just like the scale at which it happened was, every time I look at it, it's just it's huge. It was absolutely massive. If you just see the size of the serac compared to how small we were next to it, it was so terrifying. And unfortunately, there was one person who did get fully buried and ended up dying from that accident. And then there was one other person who sustained an injury. Unfortunately, had to call it an expedition. But yeah, it just re-enhanced or re-emphasized the seriousness of what we were dealing with, and that it's no joke. And I knew that going into the climb, but you don't know until you don't know until you get an experience like that, and then you walk away from something like that. You're so much more grateful to be alive, and
of course
so much more glad to be here. You're like touching your face, you're like, yes, I'm here, I'm still alive. And it's a relief, to say the least.
Yeah, well, another reminder is I think there's actually, like, they leave the bodies there, right? You probably come across quite a lot of those on the way up. And for you as a 13-year-old at the time, like, it must have been, I don't know, like, I suppose, like, we know about it now. Obviously, we have internet and we can hear stories and stuff. But for you, 13 years old, climbing up there, like, what kind of effect did that have on you at the time?
Yeah, seeing remnants of people's bodies up there at that age was again humbling. And it took a lot to process. It took a long time to even process. I don't even think I could at the time when I was there. I would just I would see it and not really know how to react to it. All I knew was that the most that I could do was essentially kind of pay my respects and keep moving on. But it was weird too.
Yeah, it must have been.
Yeah, it's still something that I don't really like. Like I'm fine to talk about it. It's just that I couldn't process it at that age.
Sure.
And even now too, it's just even weird to even think about seeing a dead person, and not only a dead person, but someone who was doing exactly what you were doing out there. Overall too, it was a huge reminder that we needed to stay together as a team, stick to the plan, and that we just had a mantra of no mistakes, strong communication between all 6 of us who were aiming to go for the summit, and staying close by to one another, checking in on each other. As long as we did that, that's kind of the most that we could do. And we were kind of making sure that it was all or nothing. We made sure we had a strong pact in which, even if one of our Sherpas were feeling ill, even if it was just short of the summit, we would have sacrificed the summit for them, because up there you have to look out for one another, because when you're up in the death zone, you're in an area in which life is so fragile already with your body and how much it's taken to even survive up there, that like if any slight thing goes wrong, it is all hands on deck on making sure that person makes it out safely. Like you couldn't live with the guilt if, say you were someone was having issues and you just, said like, oh, well, the summit's right there and we're just going to keep going. And then all of a sudden, they don't make it back down. We wouldn't be able to live with ourselves if that were to happen. So yeah, of course, it's just like, we're sticking together. We're making sure that we're all good. And as long as we are, then we're going for the summit. And even if we were like 15 minutes behind schedule, we would still have to turn around too, because you're just on that strict of a time frame, and just making sure that, the limited supplies that we even have can even last us long enough. So
it's a very sensible way to approach it. And yeah, I mean, speaking to you about your experience going up and how delicate it is, and how carefully you had to take getting up into that death zone, because you're completely right. I mean, I think I wasn't really fully aware of how delicate it was, but to be even like 15 minutes behind. But I really like what you said about the teamwork, that you're in the team, and even if it was a Sherpa who was falling behind, you would have stayed with him. I think that's a really good mentality you had going up there, and that would have made it a lot more manageable when you're working as that unit going up. But I saw in one of your videos when you actually hit the peak, it was a really emotional moment for you, right?
Yeah. The summit of Everest was emotional. Probably the most emotional one that I was just expressing a lot more was the summit of Denali, because that was a tough one. That was kind of like the boot camp of mountains, in which there couldn't be a better mountain really to prepare for Everest, as far as just like the elements and very simulated environment. I would almost argue that Alaska is a harsher environment than the Himalayas too.
Really?
It's cold up there. I'd say it's more remote. There's many more unclimbed mountains up there too. Denali obviously is very popular, but Alaska is just it's a different breed of humans that live up there. And yeah, a lot. And Denali too was just a lot of vertical elevation to cover in a very short amount of time, because Everest was about 11,000 feet, but you're at much higher. You start out at a much higher altitude, but at that point from 18,000 feet and beyond, you just have to and when you get up into 8,000 meters plus, you just have to move a lot slower. On Denali, though, we start at 7,000 feet and climb up to 20,000 feet. So it's more so than Everest elevation wise, but you start lower. But still, though, like even to cover that much ground in 7 days was really tough, because I think a lot of people usually end up climbing Denali anywhere from 14 to 20 days is usually the standard time frame. And we were going just based on how we felt. We also had a lot less gear to carry and to
Mhm.
keep track of. So we were just kind of just moving a lot faster. And it was tough on me for sure, being 11 years old. And so I just remember being at the summit, like, oh my God, that was horrible. I never want to do that again. Like I was just so I was relieved to be up there too, but I was like, oh my God, we just every day was just a struggle and a mental battle too, not to mention
Mhm.
just it really put me to the test of like what I was capable of doing. And that mountain taught me how to suffer too. I think because of that, like Everest was manageable. I remember like Everest, it didn't really feel so much like a suffer fest there. I mean, it was still, don't get me wrong, but like if it weren't for Denali, I would have not been conditioned well enough to go climb a mountain like that. So Denali was the mountain that really, I think, like broke me down and really built me back up.
It must make you a more resilient person. Have you found, like, Denali kind of helped you get that resilience for climbing Everest? But
For
how would
sure.
you say that's
Yeah.
translated into the rest of your life, that resilience?
Yeah, yes and no. I'm a very I'm a very I'm a I like to think that. I mean, I'm a very empathetic person. I go out of my way to just be a very to be a very like nice person and to like show kindness, kind of treat people how I like to be treated. Um, if you knew my parents, it would definitely be a very you'd kind of understand where I get it from, because my
Mhm.
mom is like the person who is just like, just a person who expresses so much positivity and love and all that stuff. And that's kind of what I got most of. My dad, on the other hand, is very much so like that, but just with a lot more resilience, I think. And so that in of itself is something that's it's a little tougher for sure. Like I still think that yes, I can suffer like a lot more during doing athletic events too. Like I know how to suffer when uh, I'm physically being tested for sure. Uh, but I think like mentally too, just even with life too, it's kind of, I still don't think I'm a very confronting person for the most part. That's just kind of like how I was brought up for the most part. So yeah, resilience. I'm resilient more physically, I'd say, than mentally for sure. But yeah, to talk about it from that perspective, it's taught me a lot for sure. I think it's more taught me just the whole idea of like teamwork, and I think it's more taught. I'm a very communal person too. Like I kind of get stressed out if I'm not doing my part. If I'm part of a team and trying to accomplish a project or a goal or something like that. So that's kind of what all of those mounts kind of instilled in me. Like I always want to make sure that I'm just like doing my part, and making sure that you know the burden is not like being more on someone else's shoulders than mine, so that's kind of what mountaineering and doing those team expeditions kind of taught me.
Amazing. That's awesome. So, see, with climbing Everest, that's like one of the it's considered one of the biggest challenges a human can kind of go through, mentally, physically. So you did that at 13. So what like other things do you have ahead of you? Do you have any other like in projects? Any other? Do you ever plan on revisiting Everest?
Yeah, that's where, yeah, I think mountaineering, what like when everything had settled in and finished, because I mean there was Everest and then we still had the highest mountain in Antarctica to do after that. After climbing the 7 summits, it definitely felt like a bit of a
Mhm.
relief, and I felt like I wanted to like take a small break, and I felt like um, the momentum of continuing these climbs was like for me, when I'm in a momentum, I feel like I'm unstoppable. But when I let the waters kind of um, when I let the waters kind of calm down in between, it's a little bit harder to kind of get the momentum up, and that's kind of where I was. that's kind of where I was after, because I also had the passion of skiing for quite some time as well, because that's what I grew up doing mostly, and that was also something I found that I could do with my friends too. It was a lot more social, and mountaineering is not something that people my age at the time, and even people my age, do now. It's a very like, as like 35, like 40 plus year old sport. That's the general demographic of it. And so I was very surrounded by a lot of adults at the time too, so it required me to be very mature for my age, but I also was very I also like just wanted, friends to relate to at the time as well. So that's why I like started skiing a lot more, and I ended up getting pretty good, like good enough to pick up a ski sponsor in the beginning or throughout like high school, and then moving out here to Utah as well. That's why I moved out to Salt Lake City, was because of skiing. And so that was just something that I um, ended up pursuing, and then also juggling like school and work too was a little bit of a challenge. And then skiing is you realize too, like with a lot of professionals and people who are going to do some very unusual things, is that they sacrifice a lot for sure. And it since then I kind of realized like, wow, I did sacrifice a lot in order to climb these mountains. Like I sacrificed like time with my friends, and a lot of like some childhood memories, which were like unbelievable. I mean, looking back, it's like, who cares? But I mean, at the time, with what I was thinking and all the information I had, it was I was very I felt like I was very lacking of just like, even talking to girls, or just, getting along with people, my age too. So that was another thing that just kind of was just always bouncing around in my head. And so when my dad was like, what's next? I was like, I want to be a kid, like,
School,
and yeah,
hanging out with
still.
friends,
So,
climbing trees.
well, and I was like 15, and I mean, skiing was like everything I was super into as well. But even then, still, I was yeah. So you can kind of
Hmm.
you can kind of understand where my head was at the time. And then college kind of came about, or university, and I was kind of focused on that, but also like aiming to ski more. And even like right now too, it's just kind of playing catch up. So at the moment right now, it's like, yeah, I've been brainstorming quite a few things, and just getting to the drawing boards and just writing stuff down. And there's a lot of like even local challenges in which I love mountain biking. I love to ski during the winter. I also love to trail run in the summer too. So I love like there's a few looming challenges that I probably don't want to disclose just yet, because I'd rather let my actions kind of do the talking rather than words. But I have a couple of different challenges lined up this year that are mostly accomplishable within like a few days, but they're local here in Utah that I just want to have checked off my list. So I just have like a little goal of these certain endurance challenges that I want to check off too. So
That's amazing.
yeah, you'll have to keep posted on like on my
Yeah,
social media and all that stuff for what happens. It'll be later this year as like August and September approaches. But yeah, we'll see. I'm
yeah, man.
excited.
I'm following you and everything, so I'll be one of the first to see. I hope
Thanks.
when you do it, and maybe you can come back on and tell us about what happened.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it won't be like record breaking or anything like that.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
I'm there's elite athletes who are just like so above and beyond, and just so like focused on what they're doing. I love, the problem with me is like, I love to do, I have like three different sports that I like doing. And if I'm just, better than the average person, then I'm like very happy with that in of a way.
Hmm.
Again, it kind of goes back to like the whole competitive, the inner competitiveness of me. Like I didn't play team sports a lot growing up. So the drive and hunger to just like beat somebody and all this stuff, it's like, it's very hard for me to do that. I'm a lot more like self-competitive, and I just try to, you know, aim for like, how can I get faster than I was previously, so that's kind of where a lot of that's where a lot of athletes are too. So I mean, I know I'm definitely not alone with that. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is, and kind of what's next right now. It's been oddly stagnant, to be completely honest. And I always hate to say that, but I, no, I got to be an open book and honest with myself and honest with others. So but yeah,
Yeah.
it's been it's been a wild ride, man. Since then, it's hard to believe that it happened 10, 11 years ago, especially with Everest,
Wow.
to go from such a whirlwind of media too. And even doing interviews consistently like this is a trip too. I even just love like just talking to other people and hearing their experiences and what they love to do. And I'm more just fascinated with like, I think just like I love hearing other people's stories, whether it's athletic or not. Like I love hearing like survival stories or cultural stories, and I'm so fascinated with history. Going to other countries is just like the coolest thing ever. Like I realized that I'm like a little bit of an anthropologist too, because I love like talking with people. Like when I was even just talking with the Sherpas on our team, like I was just so fascinated with what it was like growing up for them in a place like that, and what their homes are like, and how they you know what their economy is like, and how they tend to survive too, and I love food too. So that's like the big thing of me. It's like if I were to pick a career, it's like it has to I ultimately want to achieve something in which I'm just going around and seeing as much of the world as possible. That's all that really matters.
That's awesome, man. I welcome you here to Scotland. You and I can do Ben Nevis together.
Thanks, man. I would love to. I'd love to see Scotland. I've never been to the UK really, other than like the Heathrow Airport, but I'd love to see the UK too. It seems like a very beautiful area, and Scotland looks like a hell of a time, man. I'd love to just like go see the pubs and just go see like the mountains and just see the history and the castles and the coastline too. So I'd love to
Come
see
on,
it
I
all.
welcome you.
Yeah.
Before we finish off, I've just got a quick small question, few small questions for you.
Hmm.
So, first, are you a reader?
I am a reader.
Yeah, well, you have to be because you're an author as well. So,
Yeah.
tell me, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book, recently read it, Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah,
Very
okay.
yeah, that's probably my favorite book that I've read so far. That like really restructured a lot of ways of like seeing our human existence right now and everything leading up to the present. So I'd say that's my favorite book.
Amazing. And do you have a favorite quote?
Oh, that's a tough one. I swear, like I'll see a quote every now and then that will kind of be my new favorite quote. I think right now the most recent one that comes to memory, that I'm kind of learning as well to apply in my life a little bit more, is that mood follows action. And it's very simple, but I think also very powerful too, because I think it helps a lot with especially a lot of people in our day and age with motivation, comparing yourself to others on social media. And I think just kind of like getting yourself out of a funk or a bit of a rut too. You kind of got to understand that you just have to do things, and then basically those feelings of accomplishments will kind of reframe your mindset too. So I think mood follows action. I don't know who said that really, but it's just kind of like a mantra, I guess, that is that's like one of my favorite quotes right now to follow.
Yeah, I entirely agree with that as well. James Allen, author of the book As a Man Thinketh, he elaborates on that idea in his book. So I'd recommend
Hmm.
you check that out.
Yeah.
But last question for you: favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Oh man, great movie. Dang, that's a tough one. These are so on the spot. I should have studied for this. What's
I ask
one
this
that
to
I
all of my
saw?
guests. I'm starting to think I should probably send these questions before the podcast.
Well, the movie one is tough because
Yeah.
books are easy to think about. Quotes, yeah, it sequentially gets harder. But oh man, I knew this. The other day I watched. Well, I guess. Well, right now I'd say like I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie, but I guess if I can just kind of reframe it, like the documentary series that I was talking about earlier, I think like The Last Dance on Netflix was one of the best and like most well done documentary series of in recent times. I thought it was just so interesting to see the like what was going into just the behind the scenes of the Chicago Bulls and during the NBA golden era of the 1990s, because that was right when I was born, and I was named after Michael Jordan too, and so
Oh wow.
my dad talked a lot about it, but I still didn't fully understand it. But watching that whole series from start to finish, I was just so captivated with like how these humans could just achieve the unthinkable and win 6 NBA championships, which has still to this day never been done. And so it was so fascinating to see just how hungry these people were to win, and especially Michael Jordan too, where he was just so competitive, like so incredibly like will sacrifice and do anything to win. So I thought that was like in my most recent collection of movies, I thought that was like the most favorite one. But I'm sure I'll think of it later and be like, damn it, I should have thought of that. But yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some major motion pictures that are really good that I haven't seen in a while. But I don't really watch too many movies. Like maybe like once a month I'll watch a really good one, but not enough. I like reading books a little bit more. So but I love a good movie and I love a good story regardless, like just something from start to finish that can just make you think, wow, that actually happened.
Great, man. Jordan, thank you so much for your time. I'm really happy to have had you on. And I mean it when I say come to Scotland and we'll do one of the mountains together.
Thanks,
But
Ray. Yeah, as far as like, yeah, especially once I'm able to travel again and hopefully get vaccinated here soon, it'll be like I will have all these places that I've never been to, and Scotland being on the list, and like I want to go to the Middle East and Pakistan and Asia and Africa too, and I will 100%. I have like a list of like people to also like hit up as well, like when I'm there too. So you're definitely on my list for Scotland.
Awesome.
And likewise, if you're ever in Utah too, so would love to make it happen.
Man. I'll let you know. Oh, thanks so much.
All right.